This is Miss Nikki the Therapist. Welcome back to my channel where we discuss children's mental health, the impact of a culture's distress on immigrants' communities' mental health, and the insight into my perspective as a school-based therapist. People have been talking recently about the British miniseries on Netflix, Adolescence. The story of a 13-year-old boy named Jamie accused of murdering his classmate. The miniseries covers the investigation process, the forensic psych assessment, it highlights raw emotions of the main character, parents, investigating detectives, friends and classmates, and the community as the details and the motives of the crime unfold. It's hard to watch. It's an absolute must-watch. There's going to be spoilers on this episode as I talk about it. Definitely activated like the therapist mode in my brain. And I have some thoughts into the very important themes that it talks about. And I want to focus on a couple of main things that come up in my line of work. I've divided them into 3 different videos. Stay in tune for the other 2 videos that are going to come out discussing the different themes. I want to talk about the different forms of grief, why it's more prevalent in our lives than just when somebody dies, and how to view and get through the different types of grief. So we often talk about grief when somebody dies, but grief occurs in other situations as well. According to American Psychological Association, their definition of grief is the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually in the death of a beloved person, but it may also take form of regret for something lost, remorse for something done, or sorrow for a mishap to oneself. The second part of that definition is so important because we experience grief in the second more than we realize, validate, or allow the space and opportunity to process. In the show, we see the most common type of grief, which is called common or normal grief. Jade, who is Katie's best friend at the school, Katie being the victim. When I look at the stages of grief, Jade is at the second stage, anger, as she's past the denial stage, and she's angry at the attention that is given to Jamie, that not enough attention given to memorialize the life of Kate. That is a part of why she's frustrated with the detective. There's more talk about who did the crime rather than honoring Katie's life. They even say at some point in the show that no one will remember her, they will only remember him. Jade acting out in the show because of her best friend's loss is an incredibly normal reaction to something traumatic that has happened, especially when you lose someone you love in such a violent way. And the invalidation that she's experiencing by the heightened focus on Jamie also exacerbates her anger. Jade will be going through the different stages of grief, but not in order, as grief experts have shared that the stages of grief that were established by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross are not always in order. A good analogy that I like to use is like ocean waves. Some days it's a small ripple, and sometimes it hits you hard like a tidal wave. You don't really know how strong the waves are going to be, and there's nothing really we can do to stop ocean waves other than to endure it and do everything we can to get through it. The feelings of grief also come and go like the ocean waves. They're unpredictable, and the best thing that we can do is giving ourselves and our loved ones the grace as we go through it. The second type of grief that we talk about, we also call complicated grief. Jamie's parents are grieving the Jamie that they knew, how different Jamie will be in their eyes moving forward. The first episode, where the investigators are showing the CCTV footage of Jamie committing the crime, and the father and son are given the space in the investigation room to talk and process. In that moment, the father's reaction is so raw, and you can see that he is in absolute disbelief of what he saw. He is struggling to balance the process, his own feelings, but also being a supportive parent to Jamie. That is a really tough position for any parent to be in. But I think in that moment, he did a really good job at continuing to emotionally support his son without praising or validating his actions. In the last episode, Jamie calls dad to wish him a happy birthday, and then breaks the news to him after 13 months since the arrest that he wants to change his plea. Dad, even though he's having a hard time processing it, is still able to kind of like rein it in and the conversation on a good note. Again, being supportive parents in a very tough situation. After the parents reflect on their parenting of Jamie, which I'm going to actually discuss in the next video, dad enters Jamie's room, tucks the little boy in he knew pre-crime. He's grieving the son that he thought he knew to what he is now. That does not mean that his grieving process is over either, or that he's processed his grief fully. Processing complicated grief has more challenges to it than common grief. and it really can interfere with daily function and well-being to the point of needing clinical intervention. In the episode, I believe the families also might be receiving family therapy from somebody named Jenny that they mentioned. Also, this is really important because in a 2021 study published in the Journal of Loss and Trauma, it shows that 44% of people with incarcerated family and friends have clinical levels of complicated grief. And that percentage was actually closer to 50%, so like half, for those who had an incarcerated family member that was like a first degree family member, like a child or a parent or a sibling. This is why it is so important for us to recognize the different types of grief, other than common grief, and continue to support our loved ones and not be afraid to reach out for help when we need it. And one thing I want you guys to take from this is we experience grief for lots of different reasons, not just death, but really from the loss of anything that has a lot of significance to us, like the loss of someone we knew, or when a new thing is revealed about them, loss of friendships, loss of our old self as we shape into a more mature version of ourselves, loss of a life that we had prior to a significant event, loss of a feeling that you get from an experience. But there's a lot of losses that can make us feel grief and go through the different stages of grief that can hit us either like the small ripples or the tidal waves. It's important to stay mindful when we see someone lose something or go through those changes, validate feelings of grief when we lose something important to us, and give ourselves and the people around us the grace that is needed. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3 on my thoughts on the show Adolescence, the miniseries as a child and adolescent psychotherapist. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content on children's mental health, acculturation, stress in immigrant communities, and my insight and perspective as a school-based therapist. I'll see you guys next time. This account is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not replace or fulfill the full scope of therapy. The content on this video does not provide diagnosis or treatment for mental illness. Engaging with this content does not create a therapist-client relationship between you and the channel.